What would you do if your mother, after years of grief and neglect, suddenly showed up and told you she was marrying a stranger? Chloe thought her life was finally settling into a routine after losing her father, but everything changed when Mom came home one day, announcing a new fiancé and a new life. Chloe was left to pick up the pieces of her broken home, watching her mother lavish attention on a new family while Chloe's needs were neglected. Stay tuned to see how Chloe takes control of her inheritance and her life. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. My earliest memories are wrapped in the warmth of my father's smile and the comfort of our small rented apartment. My name is Chloe, and until I turned 13, my life was nothing short of ordinary in the best possible way. My dad, Jake, had a gift for turning every moment into an adventure. Even though our apartment was modest, he transformed our tiny balcony into a fairy garden and turned our living room into a fort during rainy weekends. Mom, Susan, was different, more reserved, always dreaming of a bigger house, a grander life. But back then, their differences seemed to complement each other perfectly. "Chloe, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's?" Mom would ask, and I'd jump at the chance. Not because I didn't want to be home, but because Grandpa Richard's house was like a second home to me. It was this beautiful two-story Victorian, the kind with creaky wooden floors and hidden corners that begged to be explored. "Your mother needs her alone time with your father," Grandpa would say with a knowing smile when I arrived at his doorstep. "And I need my time with my favorite granddaughter." I was a perceptive child, more so than the adults realized. I understood that Mom sometimes needed space, that she and Dad had their own relationship to nurture. It didn't hurt me, if anything. It made me feel grown up. Plus, those weekends with Grandpa were golden. He'd tell me stories about Dad's childhood, teach me about managing money — he was a retired bank manager — and make the best pancakes in the world. "You know, Chloe," he said once as we sat on his porch having breakfast, "your mother dreams of a house like this. But do you know what's more important than a big house? A home filled with love." I nodded, understanding even at that young age. Our apartment may have been small, but it was overflowing with love. Dad would come home from his job at the insurance company, swing me around in his arms, and shower Mom with kisses until she laughed despite herself. Those moments made our tiny space feel infinite. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. At 13, I watched as Dad started losing weight rapidly. At first, he joked, saying he was finally getting in shape, but his eyes told a different story. The doctor's visits became more frequent, and I saw the worry begin to carve lines into Mom's face. "It's just a phase," Dad would say, ruffling my hair every week. "I'll be back to my old self in no time." But he wasn't. The disease-aggressive pancreatic cancer consumed him like a wildfire. Within months, my vibrant, strong father became a mere shadow of himself. I watched, helpless, as Mom tried to hold everything together, but I could see her crumbling inside. The last conversation I had with Dad is forever etched in my memory. He lay in his hospital bed, his hand barely strong enough to hold mine. "Take care of your mom for me, Princess," he whispered, his voice weak but full of love. "And let Grandpa guide you. He's wiser than all of us combined." The year after Dad's death felt like living in a fog. Mom spiraled into such deep depression that she could barely look at me. I guess I reminded her too much of him. Thank goodness for Grandpa Richard. He became my rock, my safe harbor in the storm our lives had become. Living in Grandpa's house wasn't just a temporary solution anymore. It became my new reality. Every morning, I woke up in what used to be Dad's old room, surrounded by his childhood photos and trophies. Grandpa made sure I kept up with school, helped me with my homework, and did his best to fill the void left by both parents, one through death, the other through grief. Mom would call occasionally, but her voice always seemed distant, detached. Her visits were even rarer, quick stops where she'd barely meet my eyes before rushing off again. I learned to stop expecting more. Then, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Dad's death, everything changed. Mom showed up at Grandpa's door one sunny Saturday morning, and I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the grieving widow in black, replaced by someone wearing a bright yellow dress and sporting a new haircut. Her face was glowing with unhappiness. "Chloe, sweetie, pack your things. You're coming home?" she announced, bouncing on her heels like a teenager. I looked at Grandpa, confused. He seemed just as surprised as I was. The drive back to our apartment was filled with Mom's cheerful chatter about everything and nothing. It was like sitting next to a stranger who happened to look like my mother. But the real shock came when we walked through our apartment door. There, in our small living room, stood a tall man and a girl who looked about 3 years younger than me. They both smiled awkwardly as Mom practically danced to their side. "Chloe, meet Robert and his daughter Emily. Robert is my fiancé, and Emily will be your new sister. We're getting married soon." Mom beamed, clutching Robert's arm. The room started spinning. "What? When did this happen?" "Oh, we've been dating for a while now." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "I didn't tell anyone about our relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way." I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "Mom has a fiancé," I whispered into the phone. "She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter." Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. "Susan, how could you do this without telling anyone? Without telling your own daughter?" "Dad, I'm happy for the first time in forever." Mom's voice was defensive. "I've decided to start fresh, to live again. Jake would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever." There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. "I hope you'll be happy, Susan. Just don't forget you have a who needs you too." The 3 months before the wedding were like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment felt even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2, but that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emily, my stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. "Mom, can you help me with my hair?" Emily would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said "Mom" made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. Mom seemed blind to everything except Emily. When Emily mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago but was told we couldn't afford. When Emily complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emily wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. "Your sister needs to feel welcome here," Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. "Stepsister," I'd correct her. "And I need to feel welcome too." She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom? She glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fawned over Emily's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emily close, holding her hand, introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been invisible, a mere background figure in the perfect scene she was creating. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard, but I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. "Really, Dad? A check?" she hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. "I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa stayed calm, though the disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. "Susan, you're rushing everything. First the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Chloe spends half her time now." "Oh, so that's it? You're playing favorites now?" "No, I'm being practical. Maybe you should be too." I slipped away before they could notice, but the conversation lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She'd built this new, perfect family in her mind, with Emily as the star and Robert as the ideal husband. There was no room for me in that vision. So I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. There, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. Years had passed, and I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a lesson in survival. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's, where I could at least breathe. One evening, during our weekly family dinner, a charade of pretending to be one big, happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. "I've been accepted to State University," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to study finance and business management." The silence that followed felt like a heavy weight pressing on my chest. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. "Actually, Chloe," she said, her tone colder than I had expected, "I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone." I stared at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get higher education." Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "About that fund. Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emily's education. She's incredibly talented, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential." Robert nodded sagely, adding, "Emily has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do. Chloe, you could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me, and they wanted to take that too? "That money is mine," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emily." "Don't be selfish, Chloe." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Emily is your sister. Stepsister." I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. "And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else, my room, your attention, your love, but you can't have this. I won't let you take it. How dare you?" Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. "After everything we've done for you. Emily needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me?" The argument ended with a door slamming and tears, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emily would smirk whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. "Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart," he said as we drove away from the apartment. "Always has been, always will be." I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening, I'd call Grandpa to share what I'd learned. "Tell me again about derivatives," he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. "I love hearing you explain it." But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dulled. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. "It's just age catching up with me," he'd say whenever I asked about his health. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." But I did worry. The weight of it settled deep in my chest, so I started calling him twice a day instead of once. And I drove home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. There were moments when I'd catch him watching me with such intense love that it choked me up. I'd force myself to breathe, to keep my composure, but it was hard. It was the middle of my final semester when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. Mom hadn't called in 4 years. But something made me pick up. "Grandpa died last night," she said, her voice flat, drained of any emotion. "The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m., Hartford Funeral Home." The phone slipped from my hand, and everything around me went still. I don't remember much after that, only that my roommate found me, curled up on the floor, my body racked with uncontrollable sobs. Thursday came too quickly, and not quickly enough. The funeral home was just the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen understated, elegant, with large windows letting in natural light, a space that somehow felt too big and too empty without him there. I arrived early, my black dress too tight, my skin too raw, everything out of place because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they were nowhere to be found. Instead, Mr. Tziter, Harrison Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was the one organizing everything. "They're running a bit late," he explained when I asked. "Your mother called to say they'd be delayed." The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life, sharing stories about his kindness, his integrity, his humor. I sat in the front row, isolated by grief, alone with the emptiness of his absence. Halfway through, I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emily, their black outfits mismatched, out of sync, just like everything else. They took their seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was a mask of grief, perfectly in place. But her eyes? Her eyes were already darting around the room, calculating, assessing. I turned back to face the front, the tears now burning my eyes, a sharp mix of grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me. Not even for one day, not even to mourn her father together. She couldn't put aside her pettiness, her control. After the service, I drove to Grandpa's house, the place that had been my home for the last 4 years. But when I arrived, I stopped short. The sight that greeted me on the front lawn felt like a punch in the stomach. Scattered across the grass were garbage bags, torn and spilling open my belongings, my life discarded like worthless debris. Clothes, books, photo albums, all of it had been thrown out with no care, no thought. My hands trembled as I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, key uselessly in hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but this time her expression wasn't one of grief. It was triumph, cold and calculated. "Oh, good. You're here to collect your things," she said as if she was doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral? These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you better take your stuff quickly or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emily's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way." She's always wanted a bigger bedroom. I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags, trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything up, not asking questions when she saw my state. A week later, I received a call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Anderson from Anderson and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m. work for you?" I agreed, though I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it clear she was the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, Robert, and Emily were already there, seated like royalty in the leather chairs. Emily was examining her manicure while Robert scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." Mr. Anderson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document in front of him. "I, Richard Jake Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." He started with the formal language, but I saw Mom already smiling triumphantly. That smile froze when Mr. Anderson continued, "To my beloved granddaughter, Chloe Johnson, I leave my house at 1542 Oak Street, along with all its contents, and my entire savings account containing $475,000. The room went deadly silent. For a moment, then Mom's voice shattered it. "What? This can't be right!" She snatched the document from Mr. Anderson's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter!" Mr. Anderson calmly retrieved the will. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Chloe Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible. She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. He was of completely sound mind as attested by his doctor. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive." Mom's strategy suddenly shifted. The rage in her eyes transformed into tears as she turned to me. "Chloe, sweetie, please," she pleaded, her voice honey-sweet now. "We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family." I stood up, holding the folder Mr. Anderson had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave? Like how you tried to steal my college fund? Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years? That was different. This is your problem, not mine." I cut her off, turning to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." So, I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't get in. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, showing him the paperwork. "I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys." As the locksmith worked, I packed up everything that belonged to Mom, Robert, and Emily, everything they'd left behind. The clothes they'd already unpacked, their toiletries scattered in the bathrooms, and Emily's posters, which she'd already slapped onto my old bedroom wall. I stuffed it all into garbage bags, just like they had done with my things. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I dragged their bags onto the front porch and arranged them neatly, taking note of the symmetry. Their things now sat exactly where mine had been just days ago. As the sun began to set, I heard the familiar hum of Mom's car pulling into the driveway. I stood by the living room window, Grandpa's favorite spot for reading his morning paper, and watched the scene unfold exactly as I had anticipated. "What is this?" Mom's shriek cut through the air, loud enough to be heard even through the closed windows. "These are our things. All our things are outside." I opened the door but stood my ground in the doorway, watching as they approached. Mom's face was flushed with fury. Robert looked like he'd swallowed something sour, and Emily was already crying, her tears dramatic and unconvincing. "How dare you!" Mom stormed up the porch steps, rage radiating off her. "We live here now! You can't do this to us!" I stood firm, meeting her glare. "Actually, I can. This is my house now, legally and rightfully. You need to take your things and leave." "We have nowhere to go," Emily wailed, her voice rising with desperation. "You should have thought about that before giving up your apartment," I replied coolly. "Not my problem." Mom shoved at me, trying to push past into the house. I didn't budge. "Move, Chloe. This is ridiculous. This is my father's house." "No, it's my house now. And if you don't leave with your things immediately, I'll call the police to report you for trespassing. After that, all these bags go straight to the dumpster." I pulled out my phone, locking eyes with her. "Your choice." "Just like you gave me a choice about my things a few days ago. Remember?" I added, letting the words sting. The next few minutes were filled with curses, threats, and shouts of injustice as they scrambled to gather their bags. Mom alternated between sobbing and screaming about how unfair everything was, while Emily kept muttering that I'd regret this. Robert muttered under his breath, threatening to contest the will. As they loaded the last bag into their car, Mom turned to me one final time, her face twisted with hatred. "You're no daughter of mine. Your father would be ashamed of you." I smiled sadly. "No, Mom. Dad would be proud that I finally stood up for myself. Goodbye. I watched them drive off, their car disappearing around the corner. That was 6 months ago. Now I'm in my final semester, about to graduate with honors. The house is being rented to a lovely young family, and their monthly rent payments are helping me build my savings, just as Grandpa would have wanted. I found his letter in the study safe that first night after everyone left. My dearest Chloe, it began. If you're reading this, it means you've already dealt with your mother's reaction to my will. I'm sorry I had to put you through that, but I knew Susan too well. I knew what she would try to do. You have your father's integrity and my business sense. Use them both wisely. The house is yours to do with as you please, but promise me you'll keep the family photos in the attic. Some memories are worth keeping, even the painful ones. I kept that promise, along with every other one I made to both him and Dad. Now, I'm focusing on my future, letting go of the past while holding on to the lessons it taught me. Sometimes family isn't about who you're born to. Sometimes it's about who believes in you, who protects you, who helps you grow. Mom, Robert, and Emily still live somewhere in the city. I hear they found a new apartment eventually. They've tried to contact me a few times, usually when they need something, but I don't respond. Some chapters of our lives are better left closed. What do you do when your own mother turns against you, betrays your trust, and tries to strip away everything your father left you? When your family's love becomes a lie and their expectations feel like chains? Chloe spent years watching her family, particularly her mother, slowly unravel. She gave everything her time, her support, even her father's college fund, only to see her mother and stepfamily take without ever giving anything back. But when the will was read and Chloe inherited the one thing that truly mattered, the house her grandfather left her, everything changed. In a cold, calculated move, her mother tried to claim what was now Chloe's, but Chloe wasn't about to let that happen. With her grandfather's wisdom and her father's strength, she stood firm, forcing her mother and her family out not with anger, but with quiet resolve. Chloe had spent too long being the one who gave to others. This time, it was her turn to stand up for herself and claim what was rightfully hers. And the lesson here? Sometimes, the only way to truly break free is to cut the ties that bind you. Chloe didn't just get her house, she got her life back. She chose to live on her own terms, and in doing so, she honored her father's memory and her grandfather's legacy. So, here's the question. If you were in Chloe's shoes, would you have stood up for yourself earlier? Or would you have kept hoping for things to change? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
I never imagined a simple oversight would reveal Jenna's true colors. Margaret, I forgot my wallet. Can't you just cover for me this once? You always make a big deal out of your back pain, but come on, it can't be that bad. Her words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the air between us. I stood there, aghast, not just at her forgetting her wallet again, but at her blatant disregard for my condition. You know, Jenna, my back pain isn't just a minor inconvenience, and it's not about the money, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising irritation. It's about consideration, something you seem to lack. Jenna rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it sent a wave of anger through me. Oh, please, Margaret, you're overreacting. It's just lunch. I'll pay you back, she said, her tone implying the conversation was beneath her. This wasn't the first time Jenna had shown such disrespect. Since marrying my son Lucas, she had become increasingly brazen in her selfishness. I had hoped, for Lucas's sake, that she would change, but it was clear she saw no issue with her behavior. Arthur, my husband, always advised patience. Give her time, Margaret, she'll come around. But as we walked out of the cafe, me having paid for our meals, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna's actions were a glimpse into a much darker side of her character. The drive home was silent. Arthur seemed to sense my frustration, choosing not to speak. I appreciated his understanding, but part of me wished he would share in my indignation. After all, Jenna's behavior affected us both. Upon arriving home, I found solace in my garden, a place where I could find peace and think. Yet, Jenna's words lingered, a bitter aftertaste that no amount of gardening could wash away. Later that evening, as Arthur and I sat down for dinner, he finally broke his silence. Margaret, perhaps Jenna didn't mean it the way it came out. You know how she is, always speaking before thinking. I looked at him, a mix of disbelief and sadness in my eyes. Arthur, when will it be enough? When will we stop making excuses for her? She's not just thoughtless, she's cruel. Arthur sighed, a deep, weary sound. I know, Margaret, I know, but she's Lucas's wife. What can we do? The question hung in the air between us, unanswered. We finished our meal in silence, both lost in our thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder if Jenna's behavior was a storm cloud on the horizon, a warning of a tempest yet to come. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Jenna's disrespect go unchallenged any longer. For the sake of my family, I would have to find a way to expose her true nature to Lucas. He deserved to know the kind of person he had married. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my heart. What would this revelation cost us all? This confrontation with Jenna at the cafe was a pivotal moment, the spark that ignited my resolve. It was time for action. But first, I needed proof. I needed to show Lucas not just the disrespect she had shown me, but the full extent of her selfishness and cruelty. And so, my plan began to take shape. The sound of laughter and the clinking of coffee cups often take me back to when Arthur and I first met, in a small cafe not unlike the one Jenna and I had just left. It was a simpler time, a moment in my life filled with hope and the sweet promise of new love. I remember when this cafe was just a bookstore. Arthur mentioned one lazy Sunday afternoon, our hands entwined across the table. It's where I bought your first birthday present. I smiled, the memory bright in my mind, a collection of poems. You said it was because every time we talked, it felt like poetry. Arthur chuckled, a sound that warmed my heart. And you told me it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given you. Those early days were filled with such tenderness, a stark contrast to the tension that now threaded through our daily lives. Jenna's presence in our family had brought strife where there once was harmony. Our son Lucas, once so vibrant and full of life, had grown quieter, more withdrawn. I often wondered if he sensed the growing storm, if he saw the cracks in the facade of his marriage. "Dinner's ready," I called out one evening, breaking the silence that had settled in our home. Lucas and Jenna joined us at the table, the air thick with unspoken words. As we ate, I tried to steer the conversation towards happier times, hoping to bridge the gap that had formed between us. "Do you remember the trip we took to the lake house?" I asked, looking towards Lucas. "You caught your first fish, and you were so proud." Lucas smiled, a flicker of the sun I knew. "Yeah, I remember. Jenna, you would have loved it. The lake was so peaceful." Jenna, uninterested, barely looked up from her plate. "Sounds boring. I prefer the city, more to do, more to see." Arthur attempted to smooth over the awkward moment. "Well, perhaps we can plan a trip to the city then. Make some new memories." Jenna scoffed. "With what money? You know Lucas and I are saving up, unless of course you're offering to pay for it." The blatant rudeness of her remark left me speechless. Lucas, too, seemed taken aback, but he said nothing, a silence that spoke volumes. Arthur, ever the peacemaker, simply nodded. "We'll see what we can do." The meal ended quickly after that, the unspoken tension finally breaking as Jenna excused herself, claiming a headache. As the dishes were cleared away, Lucas lingered at the table, a rare moment alone with his father and me. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry about Jenna. She's been under a lot of stress lately," he said, his voice low. "We understand, Lucas, but it's important she respects your family," Arthur replied, his tone firm yet gentle. Lucas nodded, a troubled look on his face. "I know. I'll talk to her." But as he left the room, I couldn't help but wonder if words would be enough to mend what had been broken. Jenna's disdain for our way of life, her blatant disrespect for the values we held dear, had driven a wedge between us all. It was clear that something had to change. I could no longer sit back and watch as Jenna tore our family apart with her selfishness and greed. The question was, how could I protect my family from the storm that was Jenna, without losing them in the process? As I pondered this, I realized the answer lay in the past. Just as Arthur and I had built our family on a foundation of love and understanding, so too would we need to return to those values to save it. But first, Jenna's true nature had to be exposed, and for that I would need to be patient, watchful, and above all, clever. Arthur's workshop was his sanctuary, a place where he retreated to craft and repair, a hobby that brought him peace. It was there I found him, sanding down a piece of oak that would soon become a bookshelf for our living room. "Arthur, we need to talk about Jenna," I began, my tone more serious than I intended. He paused, looking up with a sigh. "What's she done now?" "It's not just one thing. It's everything. Her demands, her disrespect. It's like she's testing us, seeing how much she can get away with." Arthur set down his tools, giving me his full attention. "I know, Margaret. It's been hard on all of us, but what can we do? Lucas loves her." "But at what cost?" I countered. "We taught Lucas to be kind, to be generous. But Jenna, she takes advantage of those qualities. And it's not just us. I've heard things from the neighbors, from friends. She's not just unkind to us." Arthur nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "What do you suggest we do?" "We need evidence, something to show Lucas, to make him see her for what she truly is." "And how do you propose we do that?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'll find a way." The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. Jenna's birthday was approaching, and despite everything, we decided to throw her a small party. It was a chance to extend an olive branch, perhaps mend some fences. The day of the party, Jenna arrived late, her entrance grandiose and unapologetic. "Sorry I'm late, but you know, the salon had a long wait. You don't mind, do you?" Her tone was flippant, her attitude dismissive, as if our efforts meant nothing. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the air thick with tension. As the evening progressed, Jenna's true nature began to show. She criticized the food, the decorations, even the guests. "Is this the best wine you could afford? I would have expected something nicer from Lucas's parents." Her words were like daggers, and I saw the hurt in Arthur's eyes. This was his breaking point. "Jenna, we've welcomed you into our home, into our family. Your words, your actions, they hurt us. Is this how you treat family?" Jenna laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Oh, please, you're just too sensitive. I'm just being honest. Someone has to be." The room fell silent, the guests witnessing the unraveling of a family. It was then I realized this was the evidence we needed. Not through hidden means, but in plain sight. Jenna had exposed herself. As the party ended and the guests left, Lucas approached us. His face was a mix of embarrassment and apology. "Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Lucas. We're your family. We just want what's best for you," Arthur said, his voice steady. But I knew it wasn't enough. Seeing and acknowledging Jenna's behavior was one thing, taking action was another. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with plans and possibilities. Jenna's behavior at the party was just the tip of the iceberg. To protect Lucas, to save our family, I needed more than just words. I needed a plan, a way to expose Jenna's greed and selfishness once and for all. And as dawn broke, a plan began to take shape. A plan that would require patience, precision, and a bit of subterfuge. Jenna had shown her true colors, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The morning of our anniversary, Arthur and I woke to a silence that hung between us like a heavy curtain. Today marked 40 years of marriage, a milestone we had once looked forward to celebrating with joy and festivity, yet the anticipation that should have filled our home was tainted by the dread of Jenna's latest charade. "I can't believe we agreed to this," I murmured as we sat at the kitchen table, our coffee growing cold between us. Arthur, looking tired and worn, simply nodded. "Let's just get through tonight, for Lucas." The doorbell rang, disrupting the quiet. Jenna stood at the doorstep, dressed flamboyantly, as if the evening was about her. "Ready for your big surprise?" she chimed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. The drive to the restaurant was filled with Jenna's chatter about everything and nothing. Lucas was silent, a tightness around his eyes. Upon arrival, the extravagance of the venue took my breath away. It was the kind of place Arthur and I would never choose for ourselves, preferring the comfort of familiarity over opulence. Jenna's choice was a clear statement, a display of her control over Lucas and, by extension, us. The meal was an array of dishes we had never heard of, each more elaborate than the last. Jenna basked in the luxury, commenting on the quality of the food, the service, the ambiance, as if to remind us of our ordinary lives. As the evening drew to a close and the waiter placed the bill on the table, Jenna's act reached its climax. "Oh dear, I seem to have forgotten my purse." "How clumsy of me," she said, her voice dripping with feigned distress. The silence that followed was palpable. Arthur reached for the bill, resignation in his every move. But this time, I felt a spark of defiance ignite within me. "No, Arthur. Let's see how this plays out," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Jenna's eyes flicked between us, her mask slipping. "Well, Lucas, looks like you'll have to cover this one. I'll pay you back, I promise." Lucas, finally breaking his silence, looked at Jenna with a dawning realization. "This was supposed to be your gift to them, Jenna. Why would you invite us here without planning to pay?" Jenna's facade crumbled, revealing the selfishness beneath. "I just thought, it's your parents. You wouldn't want them to think we're cheap, right?" The ride home was a quiet storm. Lucas was lost in thought, Jenna sullen and silent. Arthur and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that this was the beginning of the end. The next morning, Lucas came to our house alone. The lines on his face spoke of a sleepless night, of decisions made and yet to be enacted. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry about last night. About everything," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've been blind, but I see now. Jenna's not the person I thought she was." Arthur and I listened as Lucas spoke of his plans, of the conversations he needed to have with Jenna, of the changes that were coming. It was a moment of bitter victory, the truth laid bare at a cost we had never wished to pay. As Lucas left, promising to keep us informed, Arthur and I sat in the quiet aftermath. The truth about Jenna was out, but the path ahead was uncertain. Our family was fractured, and the journey to healing would be long and fraught with difficulty. But in that moment, there was also a sense of relief. The pretense was gone, the lies exposed, and in their place stood the possibility of a future built on honesty, respect, and love. A future where our family could once again find peace. The days following the disastrous anniversary dinner were marked by an uneasy silence. Lucas had confronted Jenna, leading to arguments that echoed through their home, reaching us in hushed, pained recounts from our son. It was during this tumultuous time that Jenna, perhaps in an attempt to mend fences or, more likely, to salvage her tarnished image, extended an olive branch in the form of a shopping trip. "Costco's opening a new store nearby," Jenna announced over a rare family dinner at our place. "Why don't we all go?" "My treat." Arthur and I exchanged wary glances. Lucas looked from Jenna to us, a silent plea in his eyes. Reluctantly, we agreed. The morning of the trip, Jenna arrived with an air of forced cheerfulness. "Ready for some shopping fun?" she chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The store was a bustling hive of activity, with shoppers maneuvering their carts like contestants in an obstacle course. Jenna, with a zeal that seemed genuine, filled our cart with an assortment of goods, from bulk packages of paper towels to gourmet cheeses. As we approached the checkout, Jenna's demeanor shifted subtly. She began fidgeting, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Then, with a casualness that was too deliberate, she murmured, "Oh, I think I left my phone in the car. Be right back." Arthur and I stood in line, the cart between us, a monument to Jenna's extravagance. Minutes ticked by, and Jenna did not return. As we reached the cashier, the realization dawned on us with the clarity of a cloudless sky. Jenna had no intention of paying. The cashier, a young woman with a polite smile, scanned the items one by one, the total climbing with each beep. Arthur reached for his wallet, but I placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Wait," I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. This was supposed to be Jenna's treat. Let's not take that away from her. The line behind us grew restless, murmurs of impatience filling the air. Lucas, caught between loyalty to his mother and the wife he was beginning to see through, looked at me with wide, understanding eyes. "I'll go find her," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. But Arthur and I knew there was no point. Jenna had made her play, and it was time for us to make ours. "We'll just buy what we came for," I told the cashier, removing the majority of Jenna's selections from the cart, leaving only a few essentials. When Jenna finally reappeared, her phone conspicuously in hand, the deed was done. Our message was clear. We would no longer be manipulated or taken advantage of. "Where'd everything go?" Jenna asked, feigning confusion. "We thought it best to only buy what we needed," Arthur replied, his voice calm but firm. Jenna's facade cracked, her frustration visible for a brief moment before she regained her composure. "Well, I guess that makes sense. Ready to go?" But as we left Costco, The divide between us was wider than the aisles of the warehouse store. Jenna had shown her true colors once again, and this time we had called her bluff. The ride home was a silent testament to shifting dynamics within our family. Lucas, once blind to Jenna's manipulations, now saw her with new clarity. And for Arthur and me, it was a confirmation of our resolve to protect our family, no matter the cost. Jenna's attempt at reconciliation had backfired, exposing her selfishness further and pushing Lucas closer to a decision we all knew was inevitable. The end of their marriage loomed on the horizon, a painful but necessary conclusion to a union built on deceit. The weeks following the Costco debacle were tense. Jenna's facade of the doting daughter-in-law had shattered completely, her true nature exposed not just to us, but to Lucas as well. It was during this time of silent battles and unspoken grievances that the final act of Jenna's charade came to light. Lucas came to us one evening, a look of determination set upon his features that I hadn't seen in years. "I need to talk to you both," he began, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that lay beneath. "What is it, Lucas?" Arthur asked, concern evident in his voice. "It's about Jenna and me. I've decided to file for divorce." The words hung in the air, a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that Lucas had finally seen the truth, sorrow for the pain that truth had caused him. "Lucas, are you sure?" I asked, needing to hear the words from him to understand his decision fully. "Yes, I'm sure. After everything that's happened, after all the lies and manipulation, I can't see any other way. I don't know who she is anymore," he replied, the finality in his voice leaving no room for doubt. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and quiet heartbreak. Jenna, caught off guard by Lucas's decisiveness, oscillated between pleading for reconciliation and lashing out in anger. "You can't do this to me, Lucas, after everything I've done for you," she screamed during one of her tirades, her voice echoing through the halls of their once shared home. "Everything you've done? Jenna, you've lied, manipulated, and hurt everyone around you, including yourself." "This is the only way," Lucas responded, his resolve unwavering. It was amidst this chaos that Jenna's true machinations came to light. Items from our home, precious family heirlooms, had gone missing over the months. Jenna had taken them, selling them off to fund her extravagant lifestyle. The revelation came as a shock, not just to us, but to the community at large. "You were stealing from us?" Arthur confronted Jenna, disbelief and betrayal written across his face. Jenna's response was cold, devoid of remorse. "I needed the money. You have no idea what it's like, living with your expectations, your judgments. But to steal? To betray your family?" I couldn't hide the disgust in my voice, the realization of Jenna's actions cutting deep. Lucas, standing by our side, looked at Jenna with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "It's over, Jenna. You need to leave." And leave she did, her departure marked not by tearful goodbyes, but by a silent acknowledgement of the destruction she had wrought. Jenna's fall from grace was swift, the community shunning her for her deceit and theft. In the end, Lucas was granted a divorce and full custody of their child, the court recognizing the toxicity of Jenna's influence. The house that once echoed with the sounds of a seemingly happy family now stood as a testament to the price of dishonesty and manipulation. As Arthur and I watched Lucas rebuild his life, our hearts ached for the pain he had endured. But there was also hope, a belief that out of the ashes of this ordeal, a stronger, wiser Lucas had emerged. The fall of Jenna served as a harsh reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of selfishness. But it also reaffirmed the strength of our family, bound not by blood alone, but by the unwavering support and love we shared. In the quiet after the storm, as we gathered around the dinner table, a sense of peace settled over us. Jenna's shadow no longer loomed large in our lives. We were free to move forward, to heal, and to cherish the bonds that had weathered the tempest of betrayal. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family, stronger and more united than ever. The dust had settled in the weeks following Jenna's departure. Our home, once a battleground of wills and wits, had returned to its former state of warmth and peace. Lucas, having weathered the storm of his broken marriage, found solace in the company of family, his resilience a testament to the strength we knew he always possessed. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, the air filled with the light laughter of recovery and the soothing silence of shared experiences. Lucas spoke up, his voice carrying a new depth of wisdom. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, catching our attentive gazes. "About Jenna, about us, and about what I want moving forward." Arthur and I exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. We had been through the ringer, but we were here, together, and that was what mattered. "Lucas, whatever you decide, know that we're here for you. Always," I said, my voice steady, imbued with the unconditional support that had been the cornerstone of our family. Lucas nodded, a small smile gracing his lips. "I know, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. After everything, I've realized just how important family is, how important honesty and integrity are." The room fell into a contemplative silence, each of us lost in our thoughts, reflecting on the trials that had brought us to this moment of unity and understanding. It's been a hard lesson, but I'm grateful for it, for the clarity it's brought me, and for the chance to start anew. With your help, I want to be a better man, a better father, Lucas continued, his gaze firm and resolute. Arthur leaned forward, placing a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Son, you've always been those things. Jenna, she was a storm that threatened to take everything we held dear, but we weathered it together, and will continue to do so, no matter what comes our way." The affirmation was a balm to the wounds left by Jenna's betrayal, a promise of continual support and love. As the night drew on, we talked about the future, about the lessons learned and the paths yet to be taken. Lucas spoke of his hopes for his child, of building a life marked by the values we had always cherished. And as I looked around at my family, at the faces marked by trials yet shining with an unbreakable bond, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Jenna's deceit had brought pain and upheaval, but it had also brought us closer, strengthening our resolve and our commitment to each other. In the end, Jenna's downfall was not just a tale of retribution, but a catalyst for growth and renewal. Her actions, so fraught with selfishness and malice, had unwittingly sown the seeds of her own undoing, leaving in their wake a family more united and resilient than ever before. As we said our goodnights, retreating to the comfort of our beds, I couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future. Jenna had been a dark chapter in our lives, but her story was over. Now it was time to turn the page, to begin anew with the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family forged in the fires of adversity, but emerging stronger, wiser, and infinitely more loving. Walking into my house, the atmosphere felt unsettlingly silent, a stark contrast to the vibrant surprise I had imagined all day. "I'm home," I announced, my voice echoing through the empty space, expecting to see my husband Nate's smiling face or hear our daughter's giggles. Instead, a pair of unfamiliar high heels caught my attention, an intrusion in our cozy nest. Curiosity morphed into confusion as I followed the trail leading to the living room. There, framed by the soft glow of the afternoon sun, stood Nate, his arm casually draped over the shoulders of a woman I had never seen before. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the intimacy of their posture that stung. "Happy birthday, Eliza," Nate greeted, his grin wide and unsettling. "Who's this?" My voice was steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Our guest for today," Nate replied nonchalantly. "Meet Alex Carter, my lover." The room spun as his words sunk in. "Lover?" I echoed, disbelief clouding my judgment. "Yes, and since it's your birthday, I thought it's the perfect time to give you your present." Nate's tone was eerily calm as he handed me an envelope. Inside, the words divorce agreement screamed back at me, a cruel joke masquerading as a gift. This is a joke, right?" The words barely escaped my lips, each syllable a struggle. "No joke, Eliza. I want a divorce. I'm in love with Alex," Nate declared, as if discussing the weather, not dismantling our life together. The coldness in his eyes, the ease with which he shattered our vows, was more painful than the betrayal itself. "You want to throw away our life for a fling?" "Alex is not a fling. This is real. And you're just not enough anymore." His words were a knife, each syllable twisting deeper. The woman, Alex, remained silent, a spectator to the wreckage of my marriage. "Enough, Nate. If you want this divorce, you'll regret it. But you'll get what you wish for," I said, my voice laced with a calmness I didn't feel. Nate's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. You think you can make me regret this? Watch me. My reply was a whisper, a promise of the storm to come. As I turned to leave, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. My marriage, the love I thought we shared, was over. But in its ashes, a resolve was born. Nate would regret this betrayal, not today, but soon, and I would make sure of it. The silence of my bedroom offered no comfort as I lay awake, the scene from earlier replaying in my mind. The audacity of Nate's betrayal, his cruel unveiling of his affair on my birthday, was a wound that festered with each passing second. But it was his next actions that solidified my resolve for revenge. The morning after the revelation, Nate had the nerve to sit at the breakfast table as if nothing had happened. He poured himself coffee, the normalcy of the act a slap in my face. Alex was nowhere to be seen, but her presence lingered like a bad smell. Nate, I started, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You really think you can just replace me with her? And on my birthday? He shrugged, a gesture so filled with indifference it fueled my anger. Timing was coincidental. But yes, I think Alex and I will be very happy. Happy? I scoffed. You destroy our family for a fling, and you think you'll be happy? Alex is not a fling, Nate snapped, his facade slipping for the first time. She understands me, unlike you. Understands you? Or flatters your ego? I retorted, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Nate's eyes narrowed. What would you know about understanding? You're just convenient. The word struck me, a verbal blow that was meant to hurt. Convenient? I repeated, the absurdity of the situation suddenly clear. Well, let's see how convenient life is without me handling everything for you. Nate's confidence wavered, a hint of realization dawning. What are you saying? I'm saying, enjoy your happiness with Alex. But remember, actions have consequences. You'll see. I left the table, leaving Nate to ponder my words. The next steps were clear in my mind. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by infatuation and arrogance. He had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble under his betrayal. He was wrong. As I started planning, the idea of revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a promise. Nate would realize the gravity of his mistake, not just in losing me, but in underestimating my resolve. The betrayal had shattered something within me. But from those pieces, a new, determined Eliza was emerging, one that Nate would soon learn to fear. A month had swiftly passed since Nate's unfathomable betrayal, and the wounds he inflicted remained raw. Yet amidst the turmoil, a plan had taken root, one that promised not just revenge, but a revelation of Nate's folly. The day I decided to confront Nate and Alex was ordinary, with the sun casting a warm glow over what was to be the stage of Nate's unraveling. I found them together in the living room, their laughter a jarring melody in what used to be a home filled with genuine joy. Enjoying ourselves, are we? My voice cut through their merriment, causing Nate to stiffen and Alex to silence. Nate, we need to talk. About the divorce. And about Alex, I said, my tone leaving no room for the usual deflections. Nate eyed me warily, sensing the shift in my demeanor. What about it? It's about her famous writer status. You see, working in publishing, I have a good memory for authors. And Alex, I turned my gaze to the person who had invaded my life. I can't seem to recall any of your work. Alex's confidence seemed to waver under my scrutiny, a crack in the facade they had so carefully maintained. Nate, however, laughed off my accusation. You think you know every writer out there? I know enough to recognize a lie when I see one, I retorted sharply. Nate's amusement faded, replaced by a flicker of concern. What are you getting at, Eliza? Simply put, I doubt Alex is who you think she is, and I intend to find out the truth. The threat hung heavy in the air, a challenge to the web of deceit they had woven. Nate's reaction was immediate and defensive, a sign I had struck a nerve. You're just jealous, Eliza. You can't stand the thought of me being happy with someone else. Jealous? The accusation was laughable, and I let my disbelief show. No, Nate, I'm curious. And I'm going to do a little digging. Let's see what truths come to light. I left them with those parting words, a promise of the storm to come. The confrontation was not just about exposing lies. It was about reclaiming my power, about showing Nate that his betrayal would not leave me broken, but stronger, more determined. As I began my investigation into Alex's supposed literary fame, the pieces started falling into place. Each discovery, each lie uncovered, was a step closer to my revenge. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by lust and deception. He had failed to see the strength in me, mistaking my love for weakness. But as the truth about Alex began to unravel, so too would Nate's illusions. The confrontation was just the beginning. The real drama was yet to unfold, and I would ensure Nate watched as his world crumbled around him, piece by piece. My investigation into Alex Carter's background revealed a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. Armed with undeniable proof, I confronted Nate and Alex, determined to expose the deceit that had upended my life. I found them in what used to be our shared home office, now a testament to Nate's betrayal. Without preamble, I laid out the evidence I had gathered. Alex Carter, or should I say Alex Connors, not a writer, but quite the actor. Nate's face paled, a stark contrast to Alex's growing unease. "What are you talking about, Eliza? Did you really think you could fool me? Your famous writer is nothing more than a fabricator of lies. There's no record of any Alex Carter publishing anything. But Alex Connors, on the other hand, has quite a history of deception." What Alex attempted to interject, but I wasn't finished. "Save it. I'm not interested in anything you have to say." Turning to Nate, I continued, "You brought this person into our lives, into our daughter's life, based on what, a fantasy?" Nate stumbled over his words, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You were too blinded by whatever it is you thought you found in Alex. But the truth, it's far from the illusion you've been living. The confrontation was not just about exposing Alex. It was a reckoning for Nate. The man who had promised to love and cherish me, forsaking all others, had instead chosen a path of betrayal and lies. "I want you out," I said, my voice devoid of the love and warmth it once held for Nate. "Out of this house and out of our lives. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." Nate tried to argue, to plead for understanding, but there was nothing left to discuss. "You made your bed, Nate. Now you get to lie in it. Alone." As Nate and Alex gathered their things, the finality of the moment settled over me. This was not the life I had envisioned, but it was the one I was left with. Yet, in the midst of the chaos and heartbreak, a sense of empowerment began to take root. Nate's descent was of his own making, a direct result of his actions and choices. Watching them leave, I knew this was only the beginning. Nate's betrayal had unleashed a storm within me, one that would not be satisfied until justice was served. My revenge had only just begun, and Nate would soon realize the true cost of his actions. In the aftermath of Nate's revelation, I had expected him to retreat, to lick his wounds in private. Instead, he showed up at my doorstep, looking more haggard than I had ever seen him. The desperation in his eyes was palpable as he stood there, waiting for me to speak first. "What do you want, Nate?" My voice was cold, unwelcoming. I need to talk to you." "About Alex and everything." He stumbled over his words, a man defeated. I considered turning him away, letting him drown in the mess he had made. But curiosity, and admittedly a desire to witness his suffering up close, compelled me to let him in. We sat across from each other, the air thick with tension. Nate was the first to break the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, he wasn't who I thought he was. I was fooled, Eliza." "Fooled? Or too blinded by your own betrayal to see the truth?" I couldn't help the bitterness that seeped into my words. It was all a lie, his identity, his story. I don't even know who he is anymore. "And you think this confession changes anything between us?" Nate looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. "I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but Eliza, you have to believe me. I was deceived." The conversation was a farce, a pathetic attempt by Nate to garner sympathy where none was due. But as much as I despised him for what he had done, I couldn't ignore the implications of his deceit. "So, what do you plan to do now? Crawl back to the life you so carelessly threw away?" Nate's eyes met mine, a flicker of hope in their depths. I was hoping we could start over, maybe not as a couple, but as friends?" The suggestion was laughable. Friends after everything he had done? "Nate, you destroyed our family. You chose Alex over your own wife and daughter, and now you come here seeking friendship?" I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't know where else to turn." The pathetic sight of him, a man broken by his own choices, stirred something in me. Not pity, but a resolve to see this revenge through to the end. "Nate, you need to leave. There's nothing for you here." Not anymore. He nodded, a man resigned to his fate, and stood to leave. But before he could reach the door, I stopped him with a final thought. Let this be a lesson, Nate. You can't play with people's lives and expect to walk away unscathed. Karma always finds a way. With that, Nate walked out of my life, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a path to a new beginning for me. His exposure was complete, his illusions shattered, and as for me, the next chapter of my life was just beginning, one where I would rebuild stronger, wiser, and without the shadow of Nate's betrayal hanging over me. As the door closed behind him, I felt a sense of closure. The drama and revenge had played out, leaving behind a lesson in its wake. For Nate, a future filled with regret. And for me, a world of possibilities, free from the chains of a love that had turned toxic. The story of Nate and Alex was a cautionary tale, one that would serve as a reminder of the price of deceit. And as I looked ahead, I knew that the best revenge was not just in the suffering of those who had wronged me, but in the life I would build from the ashes of their betrayal. The days following Nate's departure were filled with a quiet that spoke volumes. It was the calm after the storm, a peace I had longed for yet felt oddly unsettling. The final act of my revenge was nearing, the stage set for a confrontation that would seal Nate's fate and liberate me from the past. I was sorting through the last of Nate's belongings, a symbolic gesture of closure, when the doorbell rang. Standing on my doorstep was not Nate, as I had half expected, but Alex, no longer the confident interloper but a figure of confusion and regret. "Eliza, may I come in?" Alex's voice was timid, a stark contrast to the boldness I had witnessed before. I hesitated, my initial instinct to shut the door in his face, but the desire for answers, for an understanding of the role Alex had played in this sordid tale stayed my hand. Inside, Alex sat awkwardly, a man out of place in a home that had once been filled with laughter and love. I owe you an apology," Alex began, his gaze fixed on the floor. "For everything." "An apology?" I echoed, the word sounding hollow. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Alex flinched, the weight of his actions a visible burden. I realized now I was a tool in Nate's game. I believed his lies just as you did. The confession was unexpected, a glimpse into the complexity of the situation I hadn't considered. "You were fooled by him too?" "Yes, I thought we had something real, but I was just convenient, for lack of a better word." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Alex, much like myself, had been deceived by Nate's facade. But while my pain stemmed from a betrayal of vows, Alex's was born of a misplaced trust. "And now?" I asked, curiosity overcoming my resentment. "Now I'm left with nothing, no Nate, no future, just the fallout of a relationship built on lies." The conversation was a revelation, the lines between victim and villain blurred. Alex's role in my story was not as clear-cut as I had believed, his presence not the cause of my suffering, but a symptom of Nate's deceit. "You know, Alex, I spent so long blaming you, hating you for what happened, but now, I see that we were both pawns in Nate's game." Alex looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he had entered. "I never meant to hurt you, Eliza. I hope you can believe that." "I do," I replied, the truth of the statement surprising even myself. "And I hope you can move on from this, learn from it as I have." As Alex stood to leave, there was a mutual understanding between us, an acknowledgement of the pain we had shared and the strength found in its wake. "Thank you, Eliza, for listening, and for the forgiveness I don't deserve." With that, Alex walked out of my life, leaving behind a story of love, betrayal, and the search for redemption. And as I watched him go, I realized that the best revenge was not in the suffering inflicted on those who wrong us, but in the grace we find within ourselves to move beyond the pain. The fallout of Nate's betrayal had brought me to the lowest point in my life, but it had also shown me the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the endless possibilities that lay on the other side of forgiveness. My story with Nate had ended, but my journey was just beginning, a journey of healing, discovery, and newfound freedom. And as the door closed behind Alex, I felt a chapter of my life closing with it, making way for a new beginning, one where the scars of the past would no longer define my future. I remember that day vividly, the day Clara came into my home carrying her newborn, with Mark by her side. They had a gleam in their eyes, one of triumph and malice, not the warmth you'd expect from new parents. I stood there, frozen, as Clara spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've fulfilled the dream Mark had, Helen. Something you couldn't do," Clara said, her smirk wide as she rocked the baby gently. Mark nodded in agreement, his eyes not meeting mine. "Our little Zoe here is going to be a stunner, just like her mom. Maybe a model or an actress someday," Mark added, his voice betraying a hint of pride that felt like a dagger to my heart. "It's time we head back. We've shown off our happiness to Helen, the singleton. I'm really satisfied today," he continued, exchanging a look with Clara that I could only describe as vile. I was dumbstruck, watching them use their child as a weapon against me. My inability to have children was a sensitive topic, one that Mark knew all too well. Yet here he was, flaunting his new family in my face, with Clara leading the charge. "Why? Why do this?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Clara laughed, a sound so cold it sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Helen, it's not about the child. It's about showing you what you couldn't give Mark, what you couldn't give us." Mark remained silent, his complicity as loud as Clara's words. I felt a rage building inside me, a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could the man I spent nearly 2 decades with be so cruel? As they turned to leave, I found my voice. "You think you've won, but this isn't happiness. It's shallow and empty." Clara paused, turning her head slightly, her smile never faltering. "Happiness is subjective, Helen, and right now I'm on cloud 9. They left, leaving a silence that echoed through the empty halls of the home I once shared with Mark, a home that now felt like a tomb of my former life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their words, their smug satisfaction, it all replayed in my mind, fueling a resolve I didn't know I had. Mark and Clara had shown their true colors, and it was time for me to show mine. I wasn't going to let their provocation be the end of my story. No, this was just the beginning. The beginning of their downfall. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclaiming my dignity and showing them that I, Helen, was not a victim of their cruelty, but a survivor. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. I was going to fight back, but not in the way they expected. I was going to rise above, and in doing so, ensure they got what they deserved. But first, I needed evidence. Evidence of their betrayal, of their true intentions. And I knew just where to start. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and revelations I was perhaps not ready to face. Yet, I was determined. For too long, I had let Mark's words and actions define me. It was time to redefine myself on my own terms. And so, with a newfound strength, I began to lay the groundwork for what was to come. Mark and Clara had underestimated me, thinking they could parade their betrayal without consequence. They were wrong. Very wrong. The next few days, I acted with a singular focus, gathering evidence of Mark and Clara's affair. It wasn't difficult. Their arrogance had made them careless. I found emails, texts, photos, each piece a stab to my heart, but also a brick in the foundation of my plan. Then, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Mark had always been meticulous about his digital footprint, but in his newfound bliss, he'd become sloppy. I discovered he had a meeting scheduled with Clara at a fancy downtown restaurant, a public display of their relationship, no doubt. It was the perfect chance to confront them. I arrived at the restaurant early, securing a spot where I could watch them unnoticed. Soon enough they walked in, laughing, touching, like a scene from a movie. A movie about betrayal. As they settled into their seats, oblivious to the world, I approached their table. Clara spotted me first, her smirk fading into a look of surprise. "Helen, what a surprise," Clara managed, her voice faltering. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. Not after the show you two put on at my doorstep," I replied, my voice steady, my heart racing. Mark looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "Helen, this isn't what it looks like," he started, the lie so blatant it was almost laughable. "Oh, save it, Mark. I'm not here to listen to your excuses. I'm here to give you both a warning," I said, leaning closer. "Your little secret? It's not so secret anymore. I know everything." Clara regained her composure, her smile returning, but it was strained. "And what do you plan to do with that knowledge, Helen? Ruin us? Please, you don't have it in you." Her words, meant to belittle me, only fueled my resolve. "Ruin? No, Clara. I plan to make sure you face the consequences of your actions, both of you. Mark's face paled, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out. There's nothing to sort out, Mark. You made your choice. Now, you'll live with it, I said, turning to leave, their stunned silence music to my ears. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I had made my stand, and there was no turning back now. The next steps required careful planning and precision. My next move was to visit a lawyer. The lawyer, Miss Avery, listened intently as I laid out my evidence and my intentions. She was sympathetic but also brutally honest about the challenges ahead. Divorce was messy, and given Mark's position and resources, it wouldn't be easy. But I'm not just fighting for a divorce, Miss Avery. I'm fighting for justice. For my dignity, I explained, my determination clear. Miss Avery nodded, understanding the stakes. Then we'll make sure we're prepared for whatever they throw at us. It's not just about the legal battle, it's about ensuring you come out of this stronger. With a plan in place, I left her office feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. But the real surprise came the following day when a package arrived at my door. Inside, I found a flash drive and an anonymous note. Thought you should know the whole story. Curiosity piqued. I plugged the drive into my computer and was met with a barrage of documents, photos, and videos. Evidence not just of the affair, but of financial misconduct by Mark, leveraging company resources for his rendezvous with Clara. As I sifted through the files, a plan began to form. Mark and Clara thought they had played me for a fool, but they were about to learn they had underestimated Helen. This was more than just betrayal. It was corruption, and I had just the evidence to prove it. The game had changed, and I was now holding the winning cards. It was time to play them. Armed with the evidence from the flash drive, I arranged a meeting with Mark's company's board of directors. Walking into the corporate building, a sense of unease mixed with determination settled over me. This was where Mark had built his career, and I was about to expose his darkest secrets. I was greeted by the board with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I glanced around the room, my resolve firming. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here not just as Mark's wife, but as someone who has uncovered significant misconduct within this company, I began, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on the screen as I presented the evidence, transactions, emails, hotel receipts, all pointing to Mark using company funds for his affair with Clara. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock and anger as the presentation went on. Mark, who had been sitting confidently at the table, looked as if he was shrinking with each slide. Helen, this is a serious accusation. Are you certain of the authenticity of this evidence? One of the board members asked, his tone grave. Absolutely, and I believe a thorough investigation will confirm everything I've presented today, I replied, locking eyes with Mark, who refused to meet my gaze. The meeting concluded with the board promising a full investigation and Mark being suspended pending the outcome. As I left the room, Mark caught up to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Helen, how could you do this? You've destroyed everything, he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled away, my gaze cold. You did this to yourself, Mark. You thought you could betray me, use the company for your own selfish desires, and get away with it. You were wrong. Leaving Mark behind, I walked out of the building, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had taken the first step in holding him accountable for his actions, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The company's investigation confirmed my evidence, and Mark was officially terminated from his position. The news made headlines, and Mark's once respectable reputation was now in ruins. But Clara wasn't going to let things slide so easily. She confronted me one day in a cafe, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you've won, Helen? You've ruined Mark, but I won't let you get away with this. Clara spat, her voice low and threatening. I haven't done anything that you and Mark didn't do to yourselves, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. You both played a dangerous game and lost. It's that simple. Clara leaned in, her voice venomous. This isn't over, Helen. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me. I met her gaze, unflinching. I'm not afraid of you, Clara. You've already shown your true colors, and I have nothing left to lose. Bring it on. Clara stormed out of the cafe, leaving a trail of whispered speculations in her wake. I knew this was far from over, but I also knew that I had already survived their worst. Whatever Clara planned, I was ready for it. As I left the cafe, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. I was no longer the woman who could be manipulated and betrayed without consequence. I was stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever challenges came my way. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to defend my newfound strength at all costs. Clara and Mark had underestimated me, and they were about to learn the true cost of their actions. The drama and the battle for revenge were far from over, but I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the architect of their downfall, and I would see this through to the end. The fallout from Mark's termination was immediate and brutal. The press had a field day, and Mark became a pariah in his professional circle. With his career in tatters, our divorce proceedings began. I expected Mark to fight dirty, but the evidence I had against him left him with little room to maneuver. Our first meeting with the divorce attorneys was tense. Mark tried to maintain a semblance of control, but the situation was clearly out of his hands. "Let's get this over with," Mark said through clenched teeth as we sat down at the conference table. "I agree. The sooner the better," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Mark's lawyer, a slick, middle-aged man named Richard, laid out their initial offer. It was laughable, considering the circumstances. "We believe this is a fair division of assets, considering both parties' contributions to the marriage," Richard said, sliding a document across the table. My lawyer, Miss Avery, glanced over the document and scoffed. "This is hardly fair, considering Mr. Smith's misconduct has not only ended his career, but has also brought significant emotional distress to my client." Mark glared at me, his anger palpable. "You're going to bleed me dry, aren't you, Helen?" "This isn't about money, Mark. It's about accountability. You seem to forget that your actions brought us here," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. The negotiations were long and arduous, but eventually we reached a settlement that felt like justice. Mark would have to liquidate some of his assets to meet the terms, a fact that seemed to sting him more than anything. As we left the attorney's office, Mark caught up to me in the parking lot. "I hope you're happy, Helen. You've taken everything from me." "You did this to yourself, Mark. I just stopped turning the other cheek," I replied before walking away, leaving him standing alone. With the divorce finalized, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But there was still the matter of Clara, who had been ominously silent since our last encounter. I knew she was planning something, but I was determined not to let her drag me down with her. A few weeks later, Clara's plan became clear. She launched a smear campaign against me, spreading lies and rumors in a desperate attempt to salvage her own reputation. It was pathetic, but some people were swayed by her words. I refused to engage in a public mudslinging contest. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, investing my energy into new projects and distancing myself from the toxic drama that Clara was trying to create. However, I couldn't ignore her completely. Clara's actions were becoming more desperate and erratic, bordering on harassment. It was time to put an end to her vendetta once and for all. I arranged to meet Clara in a public place, a busy cafe where her antics would be witnessed by many. She arrived, smug and confident, clearly believing she had the upper hand. "Ready to beg for mercy, Helen?" Clara sneered as she sat down. "I'm not here to play games, Clara. I'm here to tell you it ends now. Your attempts to ruin my reputation are pathetic and transparent. Everyone can see through them," I said calmly. Clara's confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You think you can intimidate me? I have nothing left to lose." "That's where you're wrong. You still have your freedom to lose. Harassment, defamation, spreading false information. I have enough to take legal action against you, Clara. And I will if you don't stop," I warned. Clara's facade crumbled, revealing the fear underneath. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. I've had enough of your games. It's over, Clara. Move on with your life if you can," I said, standing up to leave. Clara was silent, her eyes following me as I walked away. I knew I had finally gotten through to her. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. I had reclaimed my life, but the scars of betrayal would take time to heal. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was looking forward to discovering what it held on my own terms. Life began to settle into a new normal. My projects flourished, and the shadow of my past with Mark and Clara seemed to recede with each passing day. However, peace was short-lived. Word reached me that Clara was back in town and she wasn't alone. I braced myself for what was to come, refusing to be caught off guard again. The confrontation came sooner than expected. I was at a community event when Clara appeared, as if out of nowhere, her presence casting a chill over the warm, sunny day. "Helen, darling, it's been too long," Clara said, her voice oozing fake sweetness as she approached me. "I have nothing to say to you, Clara. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested," I replied, turning to leave, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Oh, come now, Helen. I just wanted to catch up. After all, we have so much history together," she said, her smile sharp as a knife. "I'm not interested in revisiting history, especially not with you. What do you want, Clara?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. Clara's demeanor changed, her smile fading into a look of smug satisfaction. "I just thought you should know Mark and I are back together, and this time nothing will stand in our way, not even you." Her words were meant to wound, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. "Congratulations, Clara. I hope you're very happy together. Now, if you'll excuse me." As I walked away, I could feel Clara's eyes boring into my back, her silence more telling than any words could be. It was clear she was plotting something, but I was determined not to fall into whatever trap she was setting. The next few days were tense. I bolstered my defenses, both legally and personally, preparing for whatever Clara had planned. The attack, when it came, was both brazen and underhanded. Clara went to the press, spinning a tale of a bitter ex-wife harassing the happy couple, trying to paint me as the villain in their twisted narrative. Her interviews were filled with lies and insinuations, designed to tarnish my reputation and elicit sympathy for herself and Mark. I was furious, but I knew that responding in anger would only play into her hands. Instead, I contacted my lawyer, ready to fight back with the truth. "We'll issue a statement refuting her claims, backed up by evidence. Clara's attempts to manipulate public opinion won't stand up to scrutiny," my lawyer assured me. The statement was released, detailing the truth of our history, backed by undeniable evidence of Clara's lies and manipulations. The public's reaction was swift and overwhelmingly in my favor. Clara's narrative crumbled, her credibility shattered by her own deceit, but I knew this victory was only a battle in the ongoing war. Clara wouldn't give up so easily, and neither would I. I was ready for whatever she threw my way, my resolve strengthened by each challenge. As the dust settled, I realized that this ordeal had changed me. No longer the woman who could be betrayed and discarded, I had emerged stronger, more resilient. Clara and Mark had tried to break me, but instead they had forged me into someone new. I was Helen, and I was unbreakable. Let them come with their worst. I would face it head-on, and I would prevail. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was the master of my destiny, and nothing and no one could take that away from me. A few weeks after my public rebuttal of Clara's accusations, I received an unexpected invitation to a mutual friend's art gallery opening. The buzz was that both Clara and Mark would be there. It was a deliberate setup, no doubt, a showdown they presumed I wouldn't dare face. They were wrong. I arrived at the gallery, the air thick with anticipation. Whispers filled the room as guests speculated on the night's drama. I kept my composure, greeting our host before scanning the crowd. It didn't take long to spot Clara and Mark, ensconced in a circle of onlookers, playing the part of the besieged couple. Clara spotted me first, her expression a mix of surprise and disdain. Mark's reaction was more subdued, a hint of unease in his eyes. I approached, my steps measured, my heart calm. "Helen, what a pleasant surprise," Clara said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Clara. After all, I hear we have you to thank for the drama of the evening," I replied, my tone light, belying the tension. Mark finally spoke, his voice strained. "Helen, let's not do this here. It's neither the time nor the place." "For once I agree with you, Mark, but let's be clear, any drama tonight is solely on Clara's shoulders," I said. locking eyes with him briefly before turning my attention back to Clara. Clara laughed, a hollow sound that echoed oddly in the crowded room. Please, Helen. You think you've exposed me, but you've only played into our hands. Mark and I are stronger than ever. Your little games can't touch us. It's not a game, Clara. It's my life. A life you both tried to destroy, but here I am standing strong. Can you say the same? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. The circle of onlookers had grown, hanging on every word. Clara, sensing she was losing ground, leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me. You may think you've won, Helen, but this isn't over. I'll make sure of it. Threats, Clara? Really? You should know by now they don't work on me. Not anymore, I replied, stepping back, ready to walk away from their toxicity once and for all. As I turned to leave, Mark's voice stopped me. Helen, wait, please. I paused, facing him, an eyebrow raised in question. I'm sorry for everything, Mark said, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. It was the closest thing to a concession I would ever get from him. I nodded, accepting his apology, not because it changed anything, but because it was time to close this chapter of my life. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Clara. I wish you all the happiness you deserve. With that, I walked away, leaving the whispers and stares behind. The night air felt refreshing, cleansing, as if with each step I was walking further away from my past and into a future of my own making. In the weeks that followed, Clara's attempts to retaliate were half-hearted, the fight gone out of her. It seemed my confrontation had finally broken her spirit. Mark disappeared from the public eye, his apology at the gallery the last I heard of him. I had emerged victorious, not through revenge or malice, but by standing up for myself, by refusing to be a victim. Clara and Mark had sought to destroy me, but in the end, they were the architects of their own downfall. As I moved forward with my life, I did so with a new sense of purpose and strength. I had faced my demons and won, proving to myself and the world that I was not someone to be underestimated. I was Helen, and I was finally free. The discovery hit me like a freight train, shattering the silence of the afternoon. As I sifted through the pile of neglected mail, my fingers trembled upon an envelope with the bold print, "Termination Notice." It was addressed to Nathan. My heart raced, confusion clouding my thoughts. Why would Nathan be terminated? The apartment felt colder, the air heavier, as if bracing for a storm. I dialed Nathan's number, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Julia, what's up, calling in the middle of the day?" His voice, usually warm, now seemed distant, guarded. "Nathan, I found something odd in the mail. It's a termination notice." What happened? I tried to keep my voice steady, but panic laced my words. "I'm on a business trip in Seattle, Julia. Can't talk now. I'm in me later." The line went dead before I could protest. A business trip? The lie was blatant, almost insulting. Nathan hadn't mentioned any trips. My mind raced, piecing together his recent late nights and evasive answers. Something wasn't right. Needing clarity, I called my former boss, Linda. Her surprise at hearing my voice did little to ease my anxiety. "Julia Wells? This is unexpected. How can I help?" Linda's voice was warm but carried an undercurrent of confusion. "It's about Nathan. I found a termination notice, and he's saying he's on a business trip. I'm just trying to understand what's happening." My voice cracked, betraying my attempt at composure. There was a pause, heavy and loaded, before Linda responded. "Julia, you didn't know? Nathan was let go over a month ago. There was an incident. He leaked confidential information to a competitor." The room spun, and I struggled to breathe. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, coursed through me. "Leaked information? But why?" Linda sighed. "It's a mess, Julia. There were rumors about him and Eve, the new secretary. Both disappeared after the incident. It's believed she was involved with someone from the competitor's side. A setup, possibly." Eve? The name stung, a missing piece to a puzzle I hadn't realized I was assembling. Memories flashed, Nathan's late returns, his phone buzzing with messages he'd quickly hide. It all made sense now, a narrative of deceit I had been too blind to see. I need to think about this. Thank you, Linda." My voice was a whisper drowned out by the roaring in my ears. The call ended, leaving me adrift in a sea of betrayal. My marriage, built on love and trust, now lay in ruins, the foundation eroded by lies and infidelity. Nathan's voice echoed in my mind, a mocking reminder of the facade he had maintained. Anger bubbled within me, a fierce, burning need for retribution. Nathan and Eve, their deceit had not only shattered my trust, but jeopardized my future. They would not get away with this. I would make sure of it. As I stood in the silent apartment, a plan began to form. I would confront Nathan, demand answers, and then I would make them pay. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I intended to serve it frozen. With newfound resolve, I packed a bag. It was time to return to my family, to the home where love and honesty still held meaning. There I would heal, and there I would plot my next move. Nathan and Eve had awakened a fury within me, one that would not rest until justice was served. The drive back to my parents' house was a blur, the landscape passing by unnoticed. My thoughts were consumed by visions of confrontation and vindication. The once cherished memories of Nathan and me now soured, replaced by the bitter taste of betrayal. As the familiar outline of my parents' home came into view, a sense of determination settled over me. Nathan and Eve's deceit had marked the end of one chapter in my life, but it was also the beginning of another. One where I would reclaim my dignity and emerge stronger, no longer a victim of their treachery. The stage was set, the players aligned. It was time for the shadows of deceit to give way to the light of retribution. Returning to my family's home felt like stepping into a different world, one where the shadows of Nathan's betrayal couldn't reach. The warmth of the hearth and the familiar scent of wood shavings offered a balm to my bruised heart. Yet as I settled into the rhythm of my childhood home, the contrast between my past and present couldn't have been starker. My father, ever the stoic craftsman, noticed my turmoil. "Julia, you're home early. Is everything all right?" His voice, roughened by years of work, carried a note of concern. I forced a smile, the weight of my secret heavy on my shoulders. "Just needed a break from the city, Dad. It's nice to be back." He nodded, sensing the unspoken words between us. "Well, you're always welcome here. This home is your sanctuary." The dinner table was a tableau of familial warmth, a stark contrast to the cold lies Nathan had served. My mother's keen eyes watched me, her intuition sharp. "Julia, you've been quiet tonight. Is there something on your mind?" The floodgates opened. Under the soft glow of the dining room light, I spilled the bitter truth of Nathan's deceit, his affair with Eve, and the termination notice that had shattered my world. My brother Alex clenched his fists, the muscles in his jaw working. "That coward! To think he'd betray you like this, and with a secretary no less. He'll regret this, Julia. I'll make sure of it." "No, Alex," I interjected, my voice firm despite the turmoil within. "This is my battle. I'll handle Nathan and Eve. They'll pay for what they've done." The resolve in my family's eyes fortified my own. This betrayal would not define me. Nathan and Eve's deception would be met with a reckoning, one crafted with the precision and care my family poured into their work. In the days that followed, my sanctuary became a fortress of planning. The serene backdrop of the woods and the workshop's steady rhythm fueled my resolve. I began documenting everything, collecting evidence of Nathan's betrayal and his professional misconduct. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin I was building for Nathan's deceit. One afternoon, as I sat in the workshop, surrounded by the comforting scent of cedar and maple, my phone rang. It was Nathan, his voice oozing false concern. "Julia, darling, why haven't you been answering my calls? I've been worried about you." The term of endearment, once sweet, now tasted like poison. "Worried? That's rich, Nathan. Or should I be asking Eve how concerned you really are?" There was a pause, a moment of silence where the facade cracked. "Julia, it's not what you think. Eve is just a colleague. Nothing more." I laughed, a sound sharp and cold. "Save your lies, Nathan. I know about the termination notice, the affair, everything. You're nothing but a coward who hides behind lies and deceit." Nathan's voice hardened, the mask slipping further. "You're overreacting, Julia. We can talk about this. Fix it." "Fix it?" My voice rose, fueled by anger and betrayal. "There's nothing left to fix. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." I hung up, cutting off any retort he might have had. The finality of the act was liberating, a declaration of war against the man who had vowed to love and protect me. As the days turned into weeks, my resolve only strengthened. With my family's support, I began to rebuild, finding solace in the beauty of nature and the legacy of craftsmanship that had defined my lineage. My heart, though bruised, began to mend, fortified by the knowledge that retribution was within reach. Nathan and Eve's day of reckoning was coming. The echoes of their deceit would be drowned out by the whispers of retribution, a melody I intended to compose with meticulous care. The stage was set, and I was ready to take my stand. The next phase of my plan unfolded with a cold, deliberate precision. Armed with evidence of Nathan's duplicity and his affair with Eve, I sought legal counsel, ready to sever the ties that bound us in matrimony and deceit. My lawyer, a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering resolve, listened intently as I laid bare the extent of Nathan's betrayal. As far as cases go, Julia, this one is as clear-cut as they come. We'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and emotional distress. And rest assured, we'll make sure Nathan and his accomplice face the consequences of their actions, she assured me, her voice laced with a promise of retribution. Fueled by a mix of vindication and sorrow, I returned home, where my family awaited, their support unwavering. It was during these moments, surrounded by the comforting embrace of my family, that my resolve hardened. Nathan and Eve's deception would not go unpunished. The confrontation I had longed for came sooner than expected. Nathan, in a rare moment of courage or perhaps folly, arrived at my parents' doorstep, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Julia, we need to talk. I can explain everything," he began, stepping into the living room where my family and I stood united. "Explain? Explain how you lied, cheated, and risked our future for a fling?" My voice was calm, but beneath the surface, a storm raged. "It wasn't just a fling, Julia. Eve, she understands me in ways you never did," Nathan countered, his words slicing through the air like a knife. The room fell silent, the audacity of his admission hanging heavily between us. My brother Alex stepped forward, his anger barely contained. "You're pathetic, Nathan, to come here into our home and insult my sister with your vile excuses." "Enough," I interjected, my gaze locked on Nathan. "Your words mean nothing to me now. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. We're done, Nathan. I want a divorce, and I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of man you truly are." Nathan's facade crumbled, revealing a glimpse of the cowardice I had come to despise. "Julia, please, let's not make this messier than it needs to be. Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it, Nathan. Every single day and night since I discovered your betrayal, you're the one who hasn't thought about the consequences of your actions. But you will. Oh, you will," I promised, my words icy. With that, Nathan left, his departure as unremarkable as his presence had become in my life. The door closing behind him felt symbolic, the final chapter of our shared life ending with a soft yet resounding click. In the days that followed, the legal proceedings began. Every step, from filing the divorce papers to serving Nathan with the notice, felt like shedding the weight of a life built on lies. The evidence of his infidelity and the repercussions of his professional misconduct painted a damning picture, one that left little room for sympathy. The community, once oblivious to Nathan's true nature, began to see him for what he was. His reputation, both personal and professional, unraveled, a fitting retribution for the pain he had caused. Eve, too, found herself ostracized, her role in Nathan's life, and their collective betrayal exposed for all to see. As the legal battle waged on, I found strength in my family's unwavering support and the work that grounded me. The workshop, with its chorus of hammers and saws, became my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the beauty of creation and the simplicity of honest labor. Nathan and Eve's downfall was a slow, inevitable spiral, their actions catching up to them in a cascade of legal and social repercussions. The satisfaction of seeing justice served was bittersweet, a reminder of the cost of their betrayal. Yet amidst the chaos, I found peace. The veil of deceit had been lifted, revealing a path forward, one where I could rebuild my life on my terms, surrounded by the love and integrity of my family. The chapter of Nathan and Eve was closing, but mine was just beginning, a narrative of resilience, redemption, and ultimately renewal. In the weeks that followed Nathan's departure and the initiation of our legal battles, I immersed myself in the work and traditions of my family's craft. The workshop, with its timeless rhythm and the scent of fresh wood, became my solace and my strength. It was here, amid the shavings and the sculptures, that a plan began to take shape. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclaiming my life and legacy. My parents, sensing a change within me, offered their silent support, their love a constant amidst the turmoil. It was during one of our evening gatherings, the golden light of sunset filtering through the windows, that my father spoke up, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "Julia, your mother and I have been talking. We know you're going through a lot, but we also see the strength in you. The workshop. It's always been a part of who we are, and we think it's time it became a part of your future too." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord within me. The workshop wasn't just a place of business. It was a legacy, a testament to the values and skills passed down through generations. And now it was offering me a path forward, a way to rebuild and to make Nathan and Eve's betrayal a distant memory. As I pondered my father's words, my brother Alex brought news that added fuel to my resolve. "I heard from a friend in town, Nathan and Eve. They're trying to spin the story, make it seem like you were the one at fault." Anger flared within me, hot and fierce. "They're trying to tarnish my name? After everything they've done?" Alex nodded, his own anger mirroring mine. "But they're not finding it easy. Seems your story, the truth, is already out there. People are siding with you, Julia. Nathan and Eve, they're the ones being shunned." The news was a balm to my wounded heart. The community's support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. It reinforced my determination to not only clear my name, but to ensure Nathan and Eve faced the full consequences of their actions. With renewed purpose, I threw myself into the workshop, learning the intricacies of our craft from my father and the other artisans. Each piece I worked on, each design I sketched, felt like a step away from my past and toward a new beginning. And as I worked, I planned. The evidence I had gathered against Nathan and Eve was damning, but I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted to expose them for who they truly were, to show the world their deceit and their cowardice. My opportunity came sooner than expected. A local community event, a showcase of artisans and craftsmen from our area, was approaching. It was the perfect platform to not only promote our family's work, but to publicly reclaim my story. "I'm going to present at the event," I announced to my family one evening, a sense of purpose infusing my words. "It's time I stepped out of the shadows Nathan and Eve tried to cast over me." My family's approval was unanimous, their pride in my resilience a tangible thing. Preparations for the event began in earnest, with each of us contributing to the collection of pieces we would display. But my contribution would be more than just crafts. It would be my declaration of independence from Nathan's betrayal, a showcase of strength forged in the fires of adversity. The day of the event arrived, a buzz of excitement filling the air as the community gathered to celebrate local talent. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and anticipation as I took my place behind our display, the woodwork gleaming under the soft lights. As I spoke to the attendees, explaining the history and the heart behind each piece, I felt a sense of empowerment. Nathan and Eve's attempt to undermine me had failed. Here, among my peers and my community, I stood tall, my reputation untarnished. And then, amidst the crowd, I saw them. Nathan and Eve, their expressions a mix of surprise and unease as they realized the support surrounding me. The moment our eyes met, I knew. The battle may have been long and painful, but the victory was mine. Their deceit had been exposed, their reputations irrevocably damaged by their own actions. The event was a triumph, not just for our family's business, but for me personally. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger, my spirit unbroken. Nathan and Eve's shadows no longer loomed over me. I had stepped into the light, my future bright with promise and possibility. As the community rallied around me, offering congratulations and support, I realized that this was just the beginning. My journey from the depths of despair to the heights of redemption was a testament to the power of resilience and the unbreakable bonds of family. Nathan and Eve had sought to destroy me, but in their malice, they had only forged a stronger, more determined Julia Wells. And as I looked toward the future, I knew there was nothing I couldn't overcome. In the aftermath of the community event, the winds of change began to blow through my life with a newfound intensity. The support of the community had not only bolstered my spirits, but had also painted a target on Nathan and Eve's backs. Their attempts to navigate the social circles they once dominated were met with cold shoulders and disdainful whispers. My story, rooted in truth and resilience, had reshaped the narrative, casting them in the stark light of reality. As the divorce proceedings advanced, I was summoned to a mediation session, a final attempt to resolve matters without further court intervention. The prospect of facing Nathan and Eve, not just as the wronged party, but as an empowered woman reclaiming her narrative, filled me with a sense of grim satisfaction. The mediation room was sterile, the air thick with tension. Nathan sat across from me, his usual arrogance replaced by a sullen resignation. Eve was not present, a fact that spoke volumes about the fractures in their facade. Nathan, we're here to finalize the terms of the divorce. It's clear that the marriage cannot be salvaged, the mediator began, her voice neutral yet firm. Nathan's gaze met mine, a flicker of something. Regret, perhaps, or merely the realization of his impending downfall, crossed his face. Julia, I know I messed up. I never meant for things to go this far, he stammered, his voice lacking its usual confidence. The words meant to elicit sympathy only fueled my resolve. Messed up? You betrayed our vows, Nathan. This goes beyond a simple mistake. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences, I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. The mediator interjected. Let's focus on the division of assets and any financial settlements. Julia, your lawyer has presented a compelling case for substantial compensation considering Nathan's infidelity and the impact on your life. Nathan bristled at the mention of compensation. This is extortion. I admit I made mistakes, but to ruin me financially. Ruin you? I cut in, my patience wearing thin. You ruined our marriage, Nathan. Whatever financial consequences you face are the result of your own actions. Actions that have consequences. It's time you learn that. The mediator, sensing the futility of further discussion, moved to finalize the paperwork. The settlement was in my favor, a testament to the strength of my case and the evidence of Nathan's wrongdoing. As we left the mediation room, Nathan paused, turning to me with a look of desperation. Julia, please, can't we just put this behind us? For the sake of what we had? What we had. The words were a knife to my heart, a reminder of the love I once felt, now tarnished by betrayal. What we had died the moment you chose Eve over our marriage. Goodbye, Nathan. With those final words, I walked away, leaving Nathan and the wreckage of our marriage behind. The legal battle was over, but the fight to rebuild my life was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, my focus turned to the workshop and the burgeoning success of our family business. The community's support had translated into increased interest in sales, a silver lining in the dark cloud of the past months. Yet, as the business thrived, I couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business. Nathan and Eve's social and professional downfall was a form of justice, but it was the inner work, the healing and rebuilding of my own life, that required my attention. I poured my energy into the workshop, finding solace in the creation of beautiful things. Each piece I crafted was a step towards healing, a tangible representation of my journey from betrayal to strength. The community event, once a platform for my public vindication, became an annual tradition, a celebration of resilience and the enduring spirit of our town. My story, once a tale of pain and betrayal, had transformed into a narrative of empowerment and renewal. Nathan and Eve faded into the background, their attempts to reclaim their former lives thwarted by their own actions. The community, once deceived by their facade, now saw them for who they truly were. As for me, I emerged from the ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The betrayal that once threatened to break me had instead forged a new path, one where I stood tall, unafraid, and ready to face whatever the future held. The seasons changed, as did the narrative of my life. The community event had not only become a cornerstone for our family business, but also a testament to the enduring strength of character over the deceit and betrayal that Nathan and Eve had sown. As the workshop flourished, so did my resolve to move past the shadows of my former life. Yet, the true test of my newfound strength was just on the horizon. A year had passed since the divorce was finalized when a twist of fate brought Nathan and Eve back into my orbit. The local news carried stories of a scandal involving a significant business in town, ensnared in deceit and fraudulent activities. At the heart of the scandal were Nathan and Eve, their actions finally catching up to them in a very public downfall. The community's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Nathan and Eve, once fixtures of the social scene, found themselves ostracized, their reputations in tatters. It was during this time that Eve reached out to me, a desperate attempt to salvage what little she could from the ruins of their actions. "Julia, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm begging you to listen." Eve's voice trembled over the phone, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had once stood by Nathan's side. "Eve, you're right. You have no right. After everything you and Nathan did, why should I listen to anything you have to say?" My voice was cold, the bitterness of the past still lingering. "I understand your anger, Julia, but it's Nathan. He's in trouble, serious trouble. The business scandal has ruined him, and he's not handling it well," Eve pleaded, desperation coloring her every word. The news of Nathan's downfall, though expected, brought no joy. The man I had once loved, now a shadow of his former self, was a stark reminder of the consequences of one's actions. "Eve, Nathan's troubles are his own making. You both made your choices, and now you must live with them. My life has moved on, and I suggest you do the same," I replied, the finality in my voice leaving no room for further discussion. The call ended, but the news of Nathan's scandal lingered, a topic of hushed conversations and whispered speculations in the community. Yet, amidst the schadenfreude, a sense of closure enveloped me. Nathan and Eve's public downfall was the retribution their actions had wrought, a karmic justice for the pain they had caused. In the wake of their scandal, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had undertaken. From the depths of betrayal to the heights of personal and professional success, my path had been fraught with challenges. Yet each obstacle had only served to strengthen my resolve, to forge me into a woman who faced adversity with grace and determination. The workshop, once a refuge from my pain, had become a beacon of my resilience. The pieces we created, each imbued with the essence of our family's legacy, were more than just objects of beauty. They were symbols of a life reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. As the scandal surrounding Nathan and Eve faded into the background, my focus remained on the future. The support of the community, once a lifeline in my darkest moments, had become a foundation upon which I built my new life. My story, once marred by the actions of others, was now solely my own, a narrative of triumph over adversity. Nathan and Eve's downfall, while a fitting end to their tale of deceit, was merely a footnote in mine. My journey had taught me that true strength lies not in the vengeance we seek, but in the resilience we demonstrate in the face of life's inevitable trials. As I stood in the workshop, surrounded by the fruits of our labor, I realized that the greatest retribution was not the downfall of those who had wronged me, but the life I had built in spite of them. My legacy would not be defined by Nathan and Eve's betrayal, but by the strength, love, and integrity that had seen me through the storm. And so, with my head held high and my heart at peace, I looked toward the future, ready to embrace whatever it held, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same strength and resilience that had brought me this far. Nathan and Eve's chapter in my life was closed, but mine was still being written, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome, to heal, and to thrive. I stared at the small, crumpled envelope in my hand, disbelief etching every line of my face. My niece, Emma, had innocently handed it to me, saying it was from Grandma. Why the secrecy? I glanced at the clock. It was almost time for Emma to leave. "Thanks, sweetie," I said, tucking the envelope into my pocket as I heard my sister's car pull up outside. After a warm goodbye, I closed the door, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. My name is Avery Sullivan. At 35, I had carved out a respectable career in marketing, leading a team in a bustling firm downtown. Life, for the most part, seemed comfortably predictable. That is until Nolan, my husband of 6 years, began acting oddly. Returning to the living room, I settled on the couch, the envelope now burning a hole in my pocket. With a deep breath, I tore it open. The words scrawled across the paper were simple, yet earth-shattering. "Avery, watch Nolan closely. Things aren't as they seem." I frowned. Nolan, my carefree, often irresponsible husband, had his quirks, but what did Mom mean? Our marriage wasn't perfect, But it wasn't a disaster either. Since meeting Nolan at a mutual friend's gallery opening, life had been a whirlwind. His spontaneity was infectious, his disregard for convention charming in its own way. We married within a year, a decision that felt right at the time. But now doubt crept in, fueled by Mom's cryptic warning. The past few months had seen Nolan more secretive, his phone always on silent, his late-night work sessions more frequent. I had attributed it to his job at the tech startup, but Mom's note made me question everything. I decided to confront him. As I stood, a key turned in the lock, and Nolan entered, his face tired but smiling. "Hey, Avery, sorry I'm late. Got caught up at work," he said, shrugging off his coat. I watched him, a storm of emotions brewing inside me. The perfect opportunity to address my growing suspicions had just walked through the door. "Nolan, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady but tinged with an edge. He looked up, surprised. "Sure, what's up?" "It's about us, about your recent behavior." "I'm worried," I said, clutching the now crumpled envelope. Nolan's expression shifted, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place crossing his face. "Avery, His words trailed off as his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a visible tension settling over him. "I need to take this. We'll talk later, okay?" I nodded, frustration simmering. As he stepped into the other room, I realized the confrontation would have to wait. But then, a sharp pain shot through my chest. Nolan collapsed, clutching his left arm, his face contorted in agony. "Nolan," I rushed to him, my heart pounding. In that moment, all anger and suspicion evaporated, replaced by sheer panic. As I dialed 911, my mind raced. What was happening? Was this related to the secrets he was keeping? The questions swirled, but one thing was clear. Nolan's life hung in the balance, and with it the truth I was desperate to uncover. As the ambulance siren faded into the distance, I sat alone in the quiet room. The envelope lay forgotten on the floor, its message a haunting echo of the chaos that had just unfolded. The hospital's sterile walls did nothing to ease the turmoil churning inside me. Nolan lay in his bed, a maze of tubes and monitors surrounding him. The doctor had said it was a mild heart attack, but he was stable. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived, overshadowed by the growing web of suspicion. As Nolan slept, I couldn't help but replay our last conversation. The phone call, his sudden collapse, it felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. Over the next few days, I decided to dig deeper. Nolan's phone, usually guarded like a treasure, lay unattended on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the password screen glaring at me. I tried his birthday, nothing. Then, on a hunch, I typed in our anniversary date. It clicked open. The texts were damning. Flirtatious exchanges, plans to meet, all with someone named Clara. My heart pounded as I scrolled through message after message, each word a dagger. I confronted Nolan the next day. His initial shock quickly turned to defensiveness. "Avery, it's not what you think," he stammered, trying to sit up. "Not what I think. Nolan, you're having an affair." My voice cracked, anger and hurt warring within me. He sighed, his eyes avoiding mine. "It was a mistake, Avery. I never meant to hurt you." "Mistake? How long has this been going on?" I demanded, fighting back tears. "A few months," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I stood there, reeling from his confession. The lies, the deceit, it was overwhelming. I needed air, space to think. Without another word, I left the room, Nolan's pleas fading behind me. The next few days were a blur. The evidence was undeniable, but I struggled with what to do. Our marriage, once a source of joy, now felt like a sham. As I sat in the hospital cafeteria, my phone buzzed. It was my sister. "How's Nolan?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. "He's stable," I replied, my voice hollow. "And you? You sound off." I hesitated, then the words tumbled out. "He's been having an affair, Jess, with someone named Clara." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, Avery, I'm so sorry." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "I don't know what to do. I feel so betrayed." "Avery, listen to me," Jess said firmly. "You need to think about yourself now. Nolan made his choice. It's time you made yours." Her words struck a chord. Jess was right. Nolan had made his choice, and now it was my turn. As I hung up, a new resolve settled within me. Nolan's deceit had shattered our marriage, but I wouldn't let it break me. It was time for retribution, time to make Nolan face the consequences of his actions. I returned to Nolan's room, my steps determined. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Avery, No, Nolan. It's my turn to speak. Your affair, your lies, it's over. We're over. His face crumpled, but I didn't waver. This was just the beginning. Nolan would soon learn the true cost of his betrayal. In the days following my declaration, Nolan's attempts at reconciliation became more desperate, but the trust was shattered. His words fell on deaf ears. I was determined to unearth the extent of his deception. I began by delving into our finances. Nolan had always been vague about money, but now every statement, every transaction held potential clues. The deeper I dug, the more alarming the revelations. Secret credit cards, unpaid bills, and a trail of expenses that led straight to Clara. Nolan's hospital stay extended due to complications, giving me more time to investigate. Clara, it turned out, was the daughter of a local pharmacist known in our community. The brazenness of it all left me reeling. They hadn't just crossed paths, they had woven a web of lies right under my nose. One evening, as I sifted through bank statements, my phone rang. It was Nolan's doctor, asking me to come to the hospital immediately. "It's urgent," he said, his tone grave. Rushing to the hospital, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited. Nolan was conscious, looking more haggard than ever. But it was the doctor's words that echoed in my ears. "Mrs. Sullivan, your husband's condition is more serious than we thought. He's had a secondary complication, which has resulted in partial paralysis." Paralysis. The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I stared at Nolan, searching for any sign of deceit. But his eyes, usually so full of cunning, now reflected fear and uncertainty. Nolan reached out with his functioning hand, his voice barely a whisper. "Avery, please." "I need you." I recoiled, the magnitude of his betrayal still fresh. "Need me? Like you needed Clara?" He flinched, the guilt written all over his face. "Avery, I made a mistake, but I'm paying for it, can't you see?" His plea was pathetic, a stark contrast to the confident, carefree man I had married. But there was no sympathy in me, only a burning desire for justice. "You made your bed, Nolan. Now lie in it," I said, my voice cold. As I turned to leave, Nolan's doctor pulled me aside. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand this is difficult, but your husband requires care now more than ever." His words were a reminder of the complexity of my situation. Nolan, despite his faults, was now vulnerable, dependent. It was a cruel twist of fate, one that left me torn between my desire for revenge and a sense of duty. The drive home was a blur. My mind wrestled with the doctor's words and Nolan's newfound helplessness. It was a perverse form of karma, but it also opened a door. A door to a revenge that was subtle, yet powerful. I arrived home to an empty, silent house. The walls seemed to echo with the remnants of a life that once was. But within that silence, a plan began to form. Nolan's betrayal had cost him more than he realized. Now, it was time for him to understand the true price of his actions. A price that I would dictate, in a game where I held all the cards. The sterile smell of the hospital mingled with the scent of betrayal as I walked through its corridors. Nolan's condition had stabilized, but the paralysis remained. He looked up as I entered, a mix of hope and fear in his eyes. "Avery, I didn't expect you to come back," he murmured, his voice tinged with surprise. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Nolan. I'm here to settle things," I replied, my tone icy. Nolan attempted a weak smile, but it faltered. "I know I've messed up, but this paralysis, it's karma, isn't it?" "Karma? No, Nolan. This is just the beginning," I said, leaning in. "You've played your games, now it's my turn." His eyes widened, the realization of my intentions dawning on him. "Avery, what are you planning?" "That's for me to know, but trust me, you'll pay for every lie, every deceit." I could see the fear creeping into his eyes, a fear that gave me a sense of power, a taste of revenge. As I turned to leave, a woman entered the room. Clara. She looked at me, her eyes betraying a flicker of guilt. "Clara, this is my wife, Avery," Nolan introduced us, his voice strained. "We've met," I said, my gaze fixed on Clara. "I know all about your little affair." Clara's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "Nolan and we didn't mean to hurt you." "Hurt me? Oh, you've done much more than that, and now you'll both see the consequences," I said, my voice steely. Nolan interjected. "Avery, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied. "You've made your bed, and now you'll lie in it, both of you." With that, I left them in the room, their stunned silence a satisfying conclusion to the encounter. The game had changed. Nolan and Clara were no longer the players. They were the pawns. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister Jess. "Avery, we need to talk. I've found out something about Nolan." Curiosity piqued. I quickened my pace. Jess had always been resourceful, and if she had uncovered something new, it could be another piece in my revenge plan. We met at a nearby cafe, the bustle around us a stark contrast to the tension between us. "What did you find out?" I asked, eager yet apprehensive. Jess leaned in, her voice low. "Nolan's accident wasn't just a coincidence. He was with Clara when it happened." The revelation hit me like a wave. The accident, the paralysis, it was all intertwined with his affair. "And there's more," Jess continued. "I've heard rumors that Nolan was planning to leave you, start a new life with Clara." Anger and betrayal churned within me, fueling my resolve. Nolan's deception ran deeper than I imagined. "Thank you, Jess," I said, my mind racing with possibilities. This changes everything. As I left the cafe, a plan formed in my mind. Nolan and Clara thought they could rewrite the narrative, but I was the author of this story, and I would ensure it had a fitting end. Back home, the silence was deafening. It gave me space to think, to plan. Nolan's betrayal, now interwoven with his paralysis, had complicated things, but it also gave me an unexpected edge. The next day, I visited Nolan again. This time, my approach was different, more calculated. "Nolan, I've been thinking," I started, feigning a tone of reconciliation. "Maybe we can work things out, start afresh." He looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "Really, Avery? I would love that. But first, I need honesty, total honesty," I said firmly. Nolan nodded eagerly. "Anything, Avery, I swear." I leaned in closer. "Tell me about the accident, the whole truth." He hesitated, then began. "Clara and I were driving back from a weekend away. I lost control of the car. That's how the accident happened." I kept my expression neutral, hiding the storm inside. "And Clara?" "She was fine. Just some minor bruises," he replied, his voice faltering. I stood up, my resolve hardening. "Thank you for being honest, Nolan." As I left the room, Nolan's eyes followed me, filled with a mix of relief and confusion. Back home, I started putting my plan into action. I hired a private investigator, tasking him with digging deeper into Nolan's affair and the accident. The truth was my weapon, and I intended to wield it with precision. A few days later, the investigator provided his report. It was worse than I thought. Not only had Nolan been with Clara during the accident, but he had also been planning to leave me, to start anew with her. Fueled by this newfound information, I visited Nolan again, this time with a purpose. "Nolan, I know about your plans with Clara," I said, watching him closely. His face paled. "Avery, it's not like that." "Don't insult my intelligence," I snapped. "You were planning to abandon me, to start a life with her." Nolan's eyes darted around the room, a trapped animal looking for escape. "Avery, please let me explain." "No more lies, Nolan. I've heard enough," I said, cutting him off. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to divorce, and you're going to agree to my terms." His mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew he was cornered. "As for Clara, she'll learn the truth. All of it. Your deceit, your plans, everything." Nolan's face crumpled. "You wouldn't." "Watch me," I said, my voice cold as ice. I left him there, his pleas echoing behind me. The tables had turned. Nolan, once the manipulator, was now at my mercy, and I had no intention of letting him off easy. The game of deception he had played was over. Now it was time for retribution, and I was ready to claim my victory. The day I filed for divorce felt like stepping into a new era. Armed with the truth and a resolve of steel, I walked into Nolan's hospital room with the divorce papers. "Nolan, these are the divorce papers," I announced, placing them on the bedside table. He looked at them, his face a mask of disbelief. "You're serious about this?" "Deadly serious," I replied. "You've played me for a fool long enough." Nolan's eyes searched mine, looking for a hint of mercy. "Avery, can't we talk about this? Maybe go to counseling, try to—" "No, Nolan, there's nothing left to salvage," I cut him off. "You've made your choices, and now you live with them." He sighed, a defeated man. "What do you want, Avery?" "Everything," I said bluntly. "The house, the savings, and no alimony for you. And Clara will know everything." His face crumbled. "You'll ruin me." "You did that yourself," I replied coldly. Nolan signed the papers, his hand trembling. It was a victory, but a hollow one. I had wanted justice, but standing there, watching the broken man before me, I felt no joy, only a deep sense of loss. As I turned to leave, Clara entered the room. Her eyes widened at the sight of the signed papers. "What's this?" she asked, confusion etching her features. "Our divorce," I said, meeting her gaze. "Nolan and I are done. He's all yours now." Clara looked from me to Nolan, her expression a mix of shock and realization. "You're leaving Avery for me?" Nolan remained silent, his eyes on the floor. "Clara, you were the other woman, but now you're the only woman. Congratulations," I said, the words laced with bitterness. I walked out, leaving them to their new reality. It was a reality they had chosen, built on lies and deceit. They deserved each other. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The divorce was quick, Nolan too defeated to fight. The house, the savings, they were all mine. But they felt empty, remnants of a life I no longer wanted. I started over in a new apartment, with a new job. It was hard, starting from scratch, but it was honest, and it was mine. Through mutual friends, I heard about Nolan and Clara. Their relationship, built on the ruins of my marriage, was rocky, fraught with mistrust and guilt. They were a constant reminder to each other of how they had hurt me, and it ate away at them. As for me, I found peace in my solitude. I had loved Nolan, but that love had been based on a lie. Now I was learning to love myself, to find happiness in my independence. I realized that revenge hadn't brought me joy, but it had brought me clarity. I was stronger now, wiser, and ready to face whatever life threw at me. Nolan and Clara had each other, but I had something far more valuable, my freedom and my dignity. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Months had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. The wounds were healing, slowly but surely. I had learned to embrace the quiet, finding solace in the small joys of everyday life. One crisp autumn evening, as I sipped tea on my balcony, my phone rang. It was Jess. "Avery, have you heard about Nolan?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "No, what happened?" I replied, a flicker of curiosity igniting within me. "He's left town, moved away with Clara. Apparently, they're trying to start over somewhere new," Jess explained. I paused, processing the news. Nolan and Clara leaving town was the final chapter in our shared story. A story that had ended not with dramatic confrontations, but with quiet departures. "Do you feel okay about it?" Jess asked gently. I smiled, more to myself than to her. "I'm okay, Jess. More than okay. I've moved on." We chatted for a while longer before hanging up. I sat there, looking out at the city lights, reflecting on the journey I had been through. Nolan's betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also rebuilt me. Stronger, more resilient. I had sought revenge, but in the process, I had found something far more valuable, my sense of self. I realized that true victory wasn't in seeing Nolan and Clara's downfall. It was in my rise from the ashes of our broken marriage. It was in the life I had built for myself, one that was authentically mine. The next morning I walked to work, the city bustling around me. I felt a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. My past with Nolan was just that, the past, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. As I reached my office, my colleague, Mark, greeted me with a warm smile. "Morning, Avery. You look good today." "Thanks, Mark. It's a new day," I replied, returning his smile. And it truly was. A new day, a new chapter, one where I was the author writing my own story, one filled with hope, strength, and endless possibilities.